Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee. My name is Cam Gordon, and I'm chair of the committee, and I'm joined today by council members Andrew Johnson, Jacob Fry, Alondra Cano. We're expecting Lisa Bender, but Elizabeth Glidden won't be joining us. She is on city business doing some work. We have our first item today is going to be a presentation, and then we will cover a series of consent items, and we have a couple of discussion items at the end of the agenda. I think what I'd like to do, rather than read off the consent items now, is go right to our presentation if we could. We have a presentation we'd like to make with the Green Business Awards, and I believe we're going to have Mr. Patrick Hanlon from our environmental initiatives to come up and tell us more about this. Good afternoon.
Right, Chair Gordon, council members. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to present these awards today. A couple years ago, I had just finished giving a report to council on air quality in Minneapolis. After reporting some of the emerging issues, such as exceeding ground level ozone standards, Councilmember Gordon asked me an open-ended question: what can we do to improve air quality in Minneapolis? I would have to admit my answer was a milquetoast one. Don't get me wrong, there are certainly things we are doing to improve air quality, such as becoming a premier bike city, being national leaders in driving energy efficiency, or less prominently known projects like traffic flow studies to reduce idling times. Still, my answer didn't sit well with me. I struggled on how we could more directly influence air quality at a local level. I struggled with this because I was operating on a false paradigm. After meeting with experts who are now our partner organizations in the Green Business Program, such as the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the University of Minnesota, Environmental Initiative, the Chamber of Commerce, the American Lung Association, and the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, it became clear that a way to address air pollution, or any pollution, by a local jurisdiction may be to empower some of the best innovative minds in the city. In practice, these innovative and risk-taking minds are called entrepreneurs. They are people who don't just dream, but know how to put a dream into practical reality that addresses a societal need. After working with many of these entrepreneurs in Minneapolis, in many times adversarial roles, I understand that in large part, the idea of business versus the environment is a farce. We all want clean air, we all want to make a living. It turns out there are win-win solutions where we can have both. The places where we can find common ground and invest together in common cause are places for real and quantifiable change. On behalf of the Health Department, this committee, the City of Minneapolis, I would like to take today to give 4 Green Business Awards to our local Minneapolis businesses who made significant investments for real and quantifiable change. They went beyond any requirement or regulation to provide healthier working conditions for their employees and improved quality of our environment in Minneapolis. As we present them their award, each of them will take a moment to briefly describe their project and the benefits that they see for their business, their employees, and their community. The first person that I'd like to recognize is Dan Nelson of University Auto for a lead-free project and an energy efficiency project. Dan, if you'd like to join me up at the podium.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Nelson, and thanks for all your efforts.
Hey, thank you. First of all, again, I'm Dan Nelson. I own University Service. We are an auto repair business that also has a gas station and convenience store attached to it. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to participate in the Green Business Grant. The timing of it was quite unique. I was 1 year into owning a new business, the first business of my life, and I'm doing it with my son, so I'm having a lot of fun. But we were looking for ways to differentiate who we were and to just show the community our commitment to changing what had been a very stagnant business for a long time. And the Green Business Grant hit my desk, and I thought, no, this is what I needed. This is the courage I needed to make this big investment in this business I bought. And so with that, we were 1 year into it. I made the commitment to apply for the grant and purchase some equipment to improve the business. Our goal was to create a safer work environment for the customers that were patrons of ours, to create a better work environment for the employees, and the third was an opportunity to save some money on my energy costs. So we purchased equipment, again, with customers, employees, and the community in mind. We purchased point-of-sale equipment for our gasoline business, which included new gasoline dispensers, as well as LED lighting to enhance the brightness of our point-of-sale. We also purchased equipment for the employees, which was tire handling equipment. The tire handling equipment was for both mounting and balancing the equipment. So we did feel we accomplished some goals that we set, which was one to create a safer environment for our customers. Feedback has been tremendous from existing customers, new customers, that they're noticing the lighting is brighter, the dispensers are easier to use, and the feedback's just been tremendous. But at the same time, I forget one of the primary benefits is brighter lighting, but we're also saving energy costs. There's been about a 75% reduction in our energy costs for that same lighting. And as far as the investment in the employees, the tire handling equipment is making it much safer to work on these new low-profile tires that are coming out on all the cars. But we're also incorporating smart weight technology. It has two benefits. The first benefit is we're able to use lead-free weights, which is better for the environment, clearly. But it's also smart weight technology allows us to use less weight, which is also delivering on our operational expense. It's reduced our weight expense by about 50% as well. So that was the scope of our project. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate in the Green Business Grant.
So if the weights, can I ask a question? If the
You can
weights
ask
aren't
plenty
lead,
of questions. Sure.
if the weights aren't lead, what are the weights? Steel?
Wow, 3M, who's also a Minnesota-based company, came up with the system. So I don't exactly know what's in them, but I know, obviously it's better for the environment than lead. But I'll take that as an action item, and I'll come back with an answer.
Just curious. Yeah, we better double check on
questions?
that. All right. Well, thank you very
All
much
right.
for being here and
Thank
for
you.
all your efforts.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Thank you.
And the changing out of those lead weights is part of a Environmental Protection Agency program called, I believe it's called Get the Lead Out, but it's a program to promote businesses to switch away from that technology, which Dan did above and beyond regulation. The second person that I would like to invite up here is Mark Wold, or a representative from Martinizing. Nice. Those are two of you here. Thank you.
Hi, I am not Mark Wold. I am Karen Wold, Mark's wife, and Mark owns the Martinizing Dry Cleaners on Xerxes and 56th. And I guess we are co-owners, but he takes care of most of that. I'll do a little delivery here and hanging shirts once in a while, but that's about all I do. Luckily, he was able to drag me away from my day off from school, working in school, and the kids are home. I got the kids farmed out, and naturally I jumped at the chance to come down to City Council during the day.
Thank you so
on
much.
this beautiful day. But luckily I am a very green person, and this is something I pushed when we initially bought the dry cleaners nearly 5 years ago. But it was not something that was feasible given the cost. So we both felt it was important that I come here, and so here I am. Now, in Mark's words, we opted to replace two older perk machines with a larger hydrocarbon machine and a wet cleaning machine. The capacity of the two new machines is roughly the same, or the two old machines is roughly the same as the larger green machine that took their place. We can process the same amount of items in the larger machine than we could in those two perk machines. This machine also allows us to do more items because the process is much less harsh and much more gentle on the garments. The additional space freed up by removing those two machines and replacing with the one allowed us to also add the wet cleaning machine. And this machine also provides a softer and more gentle process that is obviously green as well. This, as I said, this was something that we had considered for a while, but with the grant, we felt the time was right, even though it was still a struggle, when coupled with this grant, that we could make it work. And so far, the neighborhood feedback has been excellent. Many longtime customers and neighbors have been in and expressed their thanks for our commitment to the neighborhood and our concern for its well-being. We feel better about providing a safer place for our employees to work, and we feel better about what we are doing for our customers as well. We have also reached out to a number of former clients who left us because we were not environmentally friendly and had some success in getting them back now. And we are just feeling that we are doing the right thing for the community and the employees and the customers, and that's very gratifying. So we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And then PERC is also, I just want to mention PERC, the chemical that they took out is also a chemical that we've picked up in some of our air quality monitoring back in 2006 when we did some air quality monitoring in the city, and then also with the study that we're doing right now over the next 2 years. And so it is a chemical of concern in Minneapolis, and there's also been some concerns about indoor air quality issues that we've had in places that coexist with these businesses. So we're very grateful that they switched away from that chemical. The next person I'd like to invite up here is Paul Oberstar with Paramount Collision.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from the council. My name is Paul Oberstar. I'm the owner of Paramount Collision Center on West Lake Street in Lindale in Minneapolis. We've been a fixture in that neighborhood since 1952, and we are using our grant to help partially fund a conversion of our paint systems from a solvent-based spray application to a water-based spray application. Basically, what happens is the solvent would evaporate into the environment as a VOC, or a volatile organic compound. The water-based application allows the paint to be sprayed and evaporates without as much pollution as it was previously. This is better for our employees, much better for the air, and in fact, we get a much better paint job on the vehicles when we do it, so it's been a win-win for all of us.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, I think that concludes. Oh, the other one that I wanted to mention was Mulroy's Auto. They weren't part of our matching grant program, but Mulroy's Auto was a pioneer in Minneapolis in switching over to aqueous-based paint application. They also have solar panels on their roof. If Pat isn't out fishing right now, he's planting trees. I think he's planted some 5,000 trees, he said, and he just ordered a post digger so that he can plant more. A very environmentally conscious person, and so I have an award that I'm going to give to him, and I'll hand deliver that one. They weren't able to make it out here today. But Pat, in response to environmental challenges, says that our common environmental challenges are like eating an elephant. It's one small bite at a time. And so the more businesses that we can support, like University Auto, Martinizing Dry Cleaners, Paramount Collision, and Mulroy's Auto in Minneapolis, the healthier we'll be. In answer to your question a couple years ago, Councilmember Gordon, how can we improve air quality in Minneapolis? The state has recently adopted a very similar program to the matching grant program and has focused almost solely on VOC reduction, similar to the project that Paul Oberstar is doing at his auto body shop. And Eric David from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency sitting down here is managing that program, and we're working together and hopefully get a lot more businesses converted away from solvent-based and VOC products in the paint applications and work towards reducing ground-level ozone. So thank you very much for your time.
So I just want to be clear, our Green Business Matching Grants program will continue?
Yes.
And how do people apply for that, or what should they be watching for?
Yeah, if anyone wants to contact me, the two main focus areas that we're looking at right now are dry cleaners, is switching away from PERC in the dry cleaning process. So if anyone has dry cleaners, either council members in your wards or anyone in the audience, in letting them know about that program, they can contact me for that. And you can probably, well, you all know how to contact me, but through 311 you'd be able to contact me. And then automotive shops is the other one that it's a focus area. And so if anyone is interested in those programs, please contact us.
Do we know how many dry cleaners are still using?
There's still 10 in Minneapolis that are still using PERC.
Well, 10 seems like a reasonable number.
It is a
I think
reasonable
we could
number, absolutely.
get the 10 to convert, and
Right.
probably in the next year or two. So maybe that could be a goal we could do.
Absolutely.
Well, I thank these businesses for participating in this. Also thank our staff for thinking of this this program and developing it and promoting it and going out there, because if that wasn't happening, these people wouldn't have been able to do it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for supporting it.
Mr. Hanlon. And I guess we don't really have any action that we need to take, but I think I just will move to receive and file that report for our purposes and make sure that it's in here and it's part of the record. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And thanks for joining us. And now we'll move on to our consent items. We have several consent items, 7, and then a receive and file item that I think maybe I'll just ask for a really brief report on the Health Department budget allocation. But on the consent items, we have first approval of appointments to the Minneapolis Public Health Advisory Committee for terms to expire December 31st. Syed Abdullahi from Ward 3 and Sylvia Perez from Mayor's Representative to be added to our Public Health Advisory Committee. Second consent item, or the third item on our agenda, is to authorize city officers to apply for a grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development Office of Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control for an amount not to exceed $3,400,000. The next item is to authorize city officers to apply for another grant, a 3-year grant, and this is in the amount not to exceed $1,500,000. And this is to support an evidence-based program to address unhealthy behaviors in at-risk minority male youth. And I think I got the right amount. The fifth item is to set a public hearing for the beekeeping ordinance for our honeybee hives. And this is to set the public hearing for the ordinance amendment for June 16th. The sixth item is to set a public hearing for the same date, June 16th, to consider appointments to the Neighborhood and Community Engagement Commission. The next item, item 7 on our agenda, is to set another public hearing, and this is for a proposed ordinance amendment amending Title 10, Chapter 192, and this is actually repealing that chapter that has to do with bread, and we'd set that public hearing for August 4th. And another public hearing we also are moving to set is for another repeal of outdated ordinance, and we'll set that also for August 4th, and that's to repeal ordinances related to water for drinking and domestic purposes. So I will move those items 2 through 8. If anybody wants to discuss anything, Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Chair Gordon. I just have a very brief comment on item number 2 on the consent agenda, which is approving the following appointments for the Minneapolis Public Health Advisory Committee. Mr. Syed Abdullahi, who is one of my constituents. He's an incredible business person and has also contributed quite a bit to the community. I'm very proud of this particular appointment because one of the things that he's been working on tackling is the language gap that people experience when they try and get health services. Now he's done so in the business context. To his credit, he's done very well for himself, but he's also done very well for the community, especially the Somali community, because when you don't understand the language, you can't possibly get the health results that you want. So what he's done is provide interpreters, and I think having this context on the committee will be very valuable for others. So I'm excited to make the appointment.
Wonderful. Any other comments? Seeing none, then I will move all consent items. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Those motions are approved then. And then maybe just briefly, we could look at number 9, and if Mr. Huff could maybe give us a brief overview. I just have one question, and this is mostly from Councilmember Glidden, who couldn't be here, but this is to receive and file a report regarding potential for increased costs for health inspectors, for overtime, permit staff, mutual aid, and other needs related to some short-term needs and also some future needs, I think, of the department. And do you have a presentation that you'd like to make?
Mr. Chair, council members, I do.
All right, fantastic.
First of all, council members and Mr. Chair, my name is Daniel Huff. I'm the Director of Environmental Health for Minneapolis Health Department. And today's my birthday, and I'm happy to spend some time with you during. Thank you. Just a brief overview of what this unit in the Health Department does. They enforce both the state and city health codes. They do routine inspections of a number of establishments, restaurants, pools, hotels, board and lodging facilities, tattoos, farmers markets, short-term events, our stadiums, and they also investigate foodborne illness outbreaks. Our goal is that we have safe places to eat, swim, and stay. Our local authority as a city is actually delegated to us by the state, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Health. The 5,000 facilities that we inspect are a huge driver in our economy. They actually provide 22,000 jobs in Minneapolis. And then injury and disease prevention obviously is good business. We have 16 health inspectors and 2 supervisors in this unit. We're running into a few unanticipated costs that we just wanted you to be aware of. First of all, we have our Major League All-Star Game, our festivals, and then our health plan review. I'll just go in briefly into these. The All-Star Game is actually 5 days of events. It's not just one game. It's a high-profile event. Therefore, we have a little heightened security on that. So we look at both food security and food safety. Food security is to make sure the food supply is not tampered with intentionally, and then food safety is obviously looking at just your normal practices of making sure food doesn't get people sick. We're going to be doing some food worker training with a lot of our venues downtown as part of that, and we'll probably be working with Hennepin County through a mutual aid agreement, getting some assistance from their inspectors as the workload's going to be pretty intense during that 5-day period. And we're coordinating with both the state and federal agencies on this. The other issue that we have, and all of these are just incurring a lot more overtime for us. We have about 1,000 events predicted this year. That's what we had last year. And these events range, from your small block event to the big aquatennial. Here's the Monarch Festival, and awfully cute kids, if I do say so myself, at the Monarch Festival. These events happen on evenings and weekends and non-normal business hours. And just the nature of the events, they're higher risk for foodborne illness. They are not in a prepared kitchen. They're outdoors. There's not plumbing right available, so you have to have hand washing facilities brought in. There are a lot of people who go to these events. Thousands of people may eat at one vendor during a few-hour period, and then they last throughout the day, and they're subject to all sorts of different climatic conditions. We've done a lot of work this year. We've revamped our application process, looked at best practices around the country, and our goal is to inspect all the events. And the real reason, now this picture here taken from the Ecuadorian Festival last year is not a picture that my staff took because we weren't there. We did not inspect that event, and in retrospect, that was a real problem. We had over 119 people sick. We had about 19 people hospitalized, caused a really huge impact upon the community. You think of the loss of income when the average duration of the illness of salmonella was 4 days, so most people lost 4 days of work. They incurred health care costs and the expense of being hospitalized for those 19 people. And we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure we're out there, we're inspecting, we're ensuring that the public is safe and that the public has trust in all of these events that celebrate our city. The other issue that we're facing is our health plan review. Any work in a restaurant that either whether it be remodeled or new has to go through plan review per the health code, and that's what our sanitarians do, our health inspectors do. And we have just, business is booming in Minneapolis, and that's a great problem to have, but it's a really big workload. 2014, we're on pace to exceed that. Some of you may know Sonia Monzel. She is our plan reviewer. So we have one full-time person And then we have a quarter of Katie Lampe's time that's also dedicated. But when we have 1.25 FTE to this kind of number, you can see what it does compared to how other agencies review plans. They have a much more robust staffing per plan. I would argue probably our plans are more complex. We're dealing with older buildings. We have all sorts of different, unique, and interesting things happening in the city, which requires more intensive review. So we have great staff. I'm very proud of the work they do, but they're pretty overwhelmed. And we're looking at a 40% increase on this workload just when we bring in the Viking Stadium for plan review of that. Because of all these things, we have a number of overtime costs, and we want to bring in a permit, which is a sort of a temporary employee for plan review this fall. And as a result, we have a fair amount of costs that we did not plan for, and just want to give you a heads up, see if you have any questions or concerns, because we may be coming back at the end of the year saying, hey, we spent a lot of overtime and are going to need an extra allocation. And we didn't want to just come and, beg for forgiveness, but actually have an opportunity to dialogue about that if you had any concerns.
I guess I'll ask a question. What do you think the anticipated overage is going to be this year, going over budget?
Chair Gordon, our estimates are that it would not exceed $85,000 to $90,000.
And then I'm curious about how we recoup some of our costs from this. Do we charge each time that we go out for one of these events, and for the permit and for the plan review? And how close are we to recouping our costs from the permit fees and the other things we charge?
Councilmember or Chair Gordon, everything that we inspect pays a fee. All of our short-term events have a permit, short-term food permit. All of our plan reviews have a plan review fee. So all of those fees are part of the regular fees that the city collects.
And how close are we to recouping our expenses through the fee system we have now?
I am in the audience. It all goes to the general fund, but I'm going to pitch this to Sandy Christensen from our city finance department.
Okay. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and other council members. In response to your question about the ability of the city to recoup the costs associated with providing the inspections and other permitting for these food-based events, in the study that we've been working on for about the past year, we found that for the majority of these events, we are recouping our costs pretty close to about 100%. We have been working with the health department and Mr. Huff specifically in looking at alternative methods for dealing with higher risk type of events and restructuring the fee schedule to appropriately charge for those events and vendors that may be a higher workload or put more strain upon our staff.
And is that a report that's going to go back to the Ways and Means Committee that work with reviewing the fees and possibly restructuring them a little bit?
That's correct. There actually was a staff direction as part of the 2014 adopted budget that included a recommendation to bring a report back to several of the committees, and certainly if that is a desire of this committee, we can add that and do a presentation here as well.
I think that might be helpful. Not all of us are on the Ways and Means, so that we will get a chance to look at it as well. And it's also good to know that we all this is being done with that committee's oversight, and it's all going to be incorporated into the budget process, correct, for next year. And this is information that will be going to the mayor as she's developing her budget for next year.
Indeed, that's correct, Chair Gordon. In fact, I just did want to commend Mr. Huff for coming forward at this time. The health department did reach out to the finance department about this issue of the additional workload. And at our recommendation, they did come forward to give you a heads up of the increased workload and to prepare you in the event that later on they may run into budget issues. At this point in time, because it's early in the year, we don't know that they'll be over budget, but we thought it was prudent to give you a heads up, and we may or may not need to provide an additional appropriation, but it's good information to have now.
And just so I understand this, we may have to provide an additional appropriation, but actually what's going to be happening is because of the fee structure and because we're actually charging enough fees to cover these expenses, that money's just going into the general fund. So presumably the general fund will be growing enough so that these funds will be available, and it's not going to be the fact that we're going to have to take money from any other program or any other reserve or contingency fund.
Absolutely, that's correct. With the additional volume of activity that's happening, of course, the volume of the revenues increases at the same time, so there is a correlation between the two.
And even though we know the All-Star Game has gotten a really good deal from us, it doesn't mean that the other activities that are going on associated with it, they're still going to be having to come through the city system.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Are there other further questions or clarifications, committee members? Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any. And I appreciate all the information. I think that it's very useful, and we'll look forward to hearing more. And I will, I'll ask the PowerPoint, which I think was great, and it seemed like I might have noticed a photo of somebody who has a birthday today in there. But I think we should post that online with the agenda so other people could see that photo and as well as the rest of the information. So let's make sure that we do that, and then I'll move to receive and file the report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And that brings us up to our last two items, our discussion items for today, which are both coming from our Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. And I will ask Mr. Rubidor to come up and start us off with the discussion of our blueprint for equitable engagement. With
Chair Gordon, committee members, good afternoon. For the record, I am David Rubidor, the Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department with the city. And I am joined today, I'm very happy to say I'm joined today by Brittany Lewis, who is a Neighborhood and Community Engagement Commissioner. She is also the chair of our Equity Engagement Steering Committee and a member of the Shingle Creek Neighborhood Association in North Minneapolis, and has been a big partner in helping to develop the work that we're going to be talking about today.
Well, welcome. It's great to have you here.
The Blueprint for Equitable Engagement is a major body of work that the department has embarked upon in collaboration with the Neighborhood and Community Engagement Commission. And ultimately what we're doing is we're putting together a multi-year strategic plan, a strategic action plan on making sure that the city's engagement efforts are equitable. So we're looking to develop an equitable engagement system for the city of Minneapolis. We're in the development phase right now, but over the last year we've actually spent quite a bit of time on this work. And I'll just start off by saying that we needed to do a kind of a refocus of the work over the last few months. We started this about a year ago, and we had the term called Blueprint for Equity. And as we were going forward, we realized that our scope was too broad, our reach was too vague, and that it was confusing, and we needed to do some additional work to get this refocused. And so working with the commission and with Brittany and her leadership on the committee, we've refocused this into now what we call the Blueprint for Equitable Engagement. We'll go through that today, and it's an initiative I think that will serve us very well. I was just going to say the department and the NCEC really work on equity in pretty much everything that we do. Most of the work that we have going forward always has some kind of equity component to it as we're engaging the community. But this is really an attempt to be very deliberate about having a committee working on and a group working on equity, really looking at our work from an equity lens. So what we've done in order to help focus this and restart this effort is we really looked at what we do. We are engagement experts. That's what we do. We work with neighborhood organizations. We work with outreach efforts. We work with city departments on supporting their engagement. We're not experts in housing. We're not experts in economic development. We're not experts in a variety of different things that are education and what have you that equity is a issue with in the city. But we're experts on engagement. So really the part of the work that we're doing is focusing our work really in the lane that we really work in. And so a major part of what we've restructured this as being is really looking at focusing our work just around the three components of neighborhood organizations, cities, boards and commissions, and city enterprise engagement. If we're successful in the work that we're doing as we're going forward, neighborhood organizations will have an increased level of resident involvement and really represent all the communities in which they serve. Our city boards and commissions will reflect the community of the city of Minneapolis. And our city enterprise and engagement, our city enterprise departments will be informed, their business plans will be informed, as well as their budgets and programming. So that's as we kind of relook at this and refocus the definition around what we actually do and where we can focus and be most effective in our work. So that's a big part of what we've laid out. So with that.
So I am the chair of the Equity Steering Committee, and I actually was the one that made the motion to the NCEC that the steering committee were to be created, and created as such so that the NCEC would have representation along with NCR staff to move forward with a very aggressive agenda. Too often, we're waiting for monthly meetings to get action items passed, and we needed an external body to be given the power to help this NCR staff move forward with a very strategic plan. On the committee, there's myself, Ishmael Israel, Jeffrey Strand, and Andy Hortolosa, all NCEC commissioners representing different districts, some north and south. And Lance Knuckles and Mr. Rubador are the staff that we work with. And we set up this structure, as I noted before, because we really wanted to ensure that our work was actively moving forward outside the once-a-month NCEC meetings. And too often, as I'm sure you experience, when you come together with a larger group and you're constantly trying to push things, you're constantly inundated with never-ending dialogue. So that was really kind of the impetus for moving it forward. Lance was charged before with the blueprint work. His scope was like 70 neighborhoods in which he was supposed to engage with. It was just too big. It wasn't focused enough. And it required an amount of time that I just didn't think and I believe Mr. Ruber didn't think the department could do in a feasible time frame. So we reimagined that. So the focused approach, which I'm really excited about, the component I'm most excited about, as someone who was always overtasked and asked to go to lots of meetings, I think something that's central to reimagining the blueprint work is going to where people are at and the meetings that they're already having. So when we developed and start thinking about which constituencies and communities we wanted to reach out to, I think that was central. Stop creating additional meetings because people have busy lives. Some people, have children, work multiple jobs, etc. Let's go to the meetings that they are already at, right? Whether it's a community organization, for instance, and we'll get to the list later on so you can see kind of how we've identified different constituent groups. But we're very much going to where they're at, to meetings they're already having, and asking them to give us space in their meetings to conduct these very focused conversations. So that's something that I think going to where people are at, I think is important. So that's key. We renamed the blueprint to Blueprint for Equitable Engagement for various reasons, but we wanted it to reflect what we're really trying to do, right? We are developing a concept paper, some of which you're seeing right now. We're presenting that work with you right now. And I will say that the part of the reason that I even joined the NCEC was because of the NCEC had a diversity task force, and they made recommendations that I believe got to City Council. I'm not really sure what happened to those. But we as a group intend to continue to present those recommendations to you all for how to diversify boards and commissions. That was part of the reason why I applied to be on the NCEC. I saw those recommendations. I thought those were amazing recommendations, but I actually wanted to see them implemented, so I got on. So I will continue to bring that up as well. Were there other things?
One of the things I meant to say at the beginning, which I did not, I'll just kind of pull back to that, in that when I was saying that we're not housing experts, we're not economic development experts, we're community engagement experts. So we really see our role as making sure that the community voice is at the table when those discussions are going on. So when CPED is holding meetings around economic development or housing development, when the council is looking at policy that have to do with equity, our role is to make sure that the community is aware that those discussions are on in a way that everybody can be included in those discussions that wishes to participate and would like to take that opportunity. So that's how we really have kind of refocused this work. The only other point that I would mention that on this new focused approach is we also realized we needed to tell our story better. This is a very confusing issue for a lot of people. A lot of people are engaged in it and they really want to have this discussion around equity, but as we have experienced, it can be very confusing as to what exactly that means. So we just need to tell our story better. And so I'm going to continue with the presentation by telling a little bit about stuff that we've already done. And then Brittany is going to take it off and then go into where we're going with the next steps. So as far as work completed so far, with neighborhood organizations, we have several things listed here. One is called the One Minneapolis Fund. This is a new program that the NCEC developed and rolled out last year for the first time. The second round of funding will actually be coming to this body in 2 weeks for the next round. We funded 3 organizations at the beginning with the intent of really giving out small grants to culturally based organizations in the city that would focus in on leadership development and then connect that leadership development piece to the city's engagement networks, whether it's boards and commissions, neighborhood organizations, what have you. We feel that this program in its first year has been extremely successful. We're really excited about in the second year that we're actually able to give out 5 grants, and again, that'll be coming next month. But as a direct result, 8 people were elected to neighborhood boards from this program just recently in May of 2014. A number of other people were interested in running, but again, it's feeding into our engagement system and making those direct connections. Neighborhood priority plans, which is a system that we have in place, which was developed with the community participation program, which is really intended about making sure that there's a direct connection between neighborhood work and city department work, and having that connection made really early in the process before decisions are made or before plans are finalized by neighborhoods, so they can have the feedback and input from the city in order to understand and establish realistic expectations. That's a way to make sure that when we get as we diversify our neighborhood organizations, that there still is a direct connection back to the city and how that engagement is intended to connect with city work. Neighborhood guides, we have developed 3 of them so far, which are basically best practices for neighborhoods, recommendations about how they do engagement, how their bylaws work. We have a number of other ones that are actually in development that will be rolling out soon. And we just had our Community Connections Conference, which is the next thing on your agenda, which we'll go over, but we had over 500 people attend that, or actually, we had 498, I don't want to, we're too short of 500, attended this year, and it was a very diverse crowd, and that really was intended also as a way to be able to connect city work and neighborhood work and bring in new people into the engagement system so they could learn about what this is all about. And so that's one area. Another area is on boards and commissions. The department and the NCEC has done a lot of work on the boards and commissions. A few years ago, we streamlined the appointment process, so now the applications are available twice a year. It simplifies the information going out to community, and so people can understand that better. We've increased outreach. The NCR department specifically and the NCEC also has done a lot of work in order to get the word out about boards and commissions when vacancies come up. And I will say that I believe there's a heightened awareness in the city about the importance of being on boards and commissions and the work that they're doing. And then we established what's called the City Academy, which has run for 2 years now and will continue on. Highly popular among city departments. It's their chance to basically show the work that they're doing with prospective or just residents in the city. So it's a 5-week course where they learn about the basic operations of the city, everything from finance, property tax collection, to going and seeing how the fire department puts out a fire, and so learning about that. So far we've had 55 graduates. We have not tracked the diversity within that group, and we haven't tracked their connection to boards and commissions. That's a piece that we're putting into place this year, so we'll have better numbers on that, and with more intentional connecting to the boards, but that is intended to be a feeder into that. Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute, what's called the BCLI. This is a Nexus Community Partners actually does this. I was talking to them today, it's a great program. It costs us no money, and it brings really qualified people to our boards and commissions that are very intended to be joining our boards and commissions. It's 2013-14 was the first year of it. 12 people graduated from the program. Everybody is a person of color and or representing a low-income community or a underrepresented community. And of the 12, City of Minneapolis and the City of St. Paul were the two communities that participated in that last year. 2 people were actually hired by the city and are now working here, and 3 people have applied for boards and commissions, 2 of which will be at the NCEC discussion when we have looking at those appointments. So direct connection there. Diversity survey, we do a diversity survey. We've done it twice for the boards and commissions. This looks at a variety of different factors. This is a measurement that we put into place to track our progress and our work around getting more broader representation on our boards and commissions. 2014 will be the 3rd time we do it. I'm really going to look for creative ways to beef up the participation. For the first 2 years, it was around 40% response rate. And I think in order for this to be a really good measure, we have to get that closer to 100% as much as possible. It's a voluntary survey where people disclose their income, their sexual orientation, their gender, their race, ethnicity, a variety of different factors that we use in order to track representation. So we'll be doing that again this year. And then the appointment process. Last year, as Brittany has alluded to, the NCEC put together a number of recommendations around boards and commissions and how we can actually help change different policies or practices, as well as the department brought some recommendations before the City Council and presented them. We're going to revisit those this year and then bring them back again. Some of it has to do directly with the appointment process, about how the council makes appointments. We have 2 examples in the city. The NCEC and the workforce are 2 commissions that actually are very diverse in their makeup and they follow very specific models of how appointments are made. And we're going to bring that back again for the council to consider operationalizing that into other boards and commissions and expanding that role. And just real quickly, so our enterprise work, most of the stuff we've already touched on, but we are working clearly with the equitable solutions and the diversity equity work going on in the city. Neighborhood priority plans I mentioned, as well as the conference. I will say at the conference we had tremendous city participation this year. We had 11 city departments have exhibit booths and over 80 city employees there, as well as 21 of the 40 workshops were actually conducted by city employees.
Okay. So, the Equity Steering Committee has come up with a number of different communities or constituents that we want to ensure that we reach out to. So in this list, as you can see, collaborating with what I believe they're calling themselves the HEC Committee. There are 2 community meetings, Intermediate Arts, OAP, Neighbors Organized for Change. I mean, we can go through this list, but what I hope you recognize here is that we're trying to go directly to kind of different organizational efforts that represent certain ethnic or racial communities. We also added recently a need to reach out to renters, youth, homelessness. We're trying to find ways to also engage with some communities that are typically left out of the conversation of kind of access and ownership, because often there's a presumption about which communities might have a bigger stake, and I think we want to make sure we get everyone's voices involved from different communities. For the neighborhood groups, what'll be different about reaching out to neighborhood orgs is that we're going to use the NCEC districts and how we're already kind of the map that defines the NCEC districts, and we put it into 3. So there'll be 1 in South, North, and I believe Northeast, and we'll be kind of inviting all the neighborhoods in those NCEC districts to come together. So that'll probably be one of the only meetings outside the HEC meetings where we have to actually schedule a meeting in addition to what other people are doing. But everything else, we're trying to really tap into where communities are at and whether it's cultural organizations, or kind of, for instance, like the African American Leadership Forum isn't, it looks different than perhaps if you were going to go over to the Lao Assistance Center, right? It's kind of a collective of Black leaders, those that are engaged in questions of the Black community. So I feel like going there would be different, but the goal of it is the same, to go where people are already at in their communities organizing, and not create additional meetings. Something I was also thinking about with this list, when reaching out to folks like ALF, making sure that ALF then invites its membership or reaches out to its broader network, so that it's not just its own leadership that are attending. I think that has to be a message sent to everyone that we reach out to, kind of the goals of it, and having them reach out to their networks for everyone to attend and participate. Were there any other?
So clearly what we're using here is an engagement strategy to improve our engagement system. So our goal is, by going out to these variety of groups, there's around, it's close around 18, 19 focus groups that we'd be holding over the course of the next 4 months, to really get some feedback about how the system's working, where people see barriers, opportunities, what type of measures people would like us to take into consideration. I would say none of these groups will have like an exclusive ability to change the system, but really to inform the department as well as the NCEC, and that we would be developing recommendations based on this input to come back to the City Council for consideration about incorporating either into practices within the department, practices within neighborhood organizations, possibly into kind of requirements within the community participation program. So there's pretty much everything is on the table, but really this is an idea to be able to get the community to tell us what they see as being opportunities. And you know, honestly, I think a large part of this too is the regulation and the changes to policies and practice will follow the engagement, and that the engagement in and of itself will help develop relationships and then help get more people involved in our engagement system. And it's just, I think, a good effort for us to undertake. So with that, the final piece is, whoops, went the wrong way. Timeline and reporting. Our group wants, our steering committee is very clear about being accountable for the work that we're doing and setting benchmarks for the community to know as we go forward when work will be completed and when they can expect results. So our focus groups that we've identified, it is our goal to have them completed by September 30th, 2014 this year. Boards and commissions appointment process recommendations, we're going to reconsider them and bring them back to this committee by the end of the summer 2014. Boards and Commissions Diversity Survey will be undertaken in July of this year. And then we've included a staff direction that asks for the NCR department and the NCEC to report back to the City Council by December 1st with a summary of the findings of this engagement process, draft recommendations and performance measures regarding the blueprint for equitable engagement. And that concludes our presentation. Any questions?
Councilmember Fry has a question.
Thank you both. You're tackling a very big issue here, so I appreciate all of your work. I'm really trying to find where the rubber meets the road on some of these pieces, so I've just got a few questions, and I don't mean to be oppositional or attacking or anything. I just want to sort of figure out how this is going to work practically. So this is on page, let's start out with page number 5, it looks like, on the, yes, right there. So it says Boards and Commission Leadership Institute in 2014. 12 people graduated from this program. Now this is a program to, this is to bring people into the neighborhood associations of diverse backgrounds, or this is to engage them with the city generally? I'm just trying to get the practical.
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Fry. Specifically, this is actually run by Nexus Community Partners. It's funded by them. They receive grants to do this program, so it's outside of the city. This is a partnership that we have. Actually, I serve on the Nexus board. For full disclosure here, the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute is a funded program that identifies people of color or folks from underrepresented groups that are interested in being part of boards and commissions, either in the city of Minneapolis or St. Paul. And next year, that's going to expand to the region. And by doing so, they need to be appointed by and sponsored by another organization. What the city of Minneapolis could say, we're recommending this person to be a candidate in this program. And then they go through an extensive course. It's a course that goes on over the course of about 6 or 7 months. And in there, they learn about boards and commissions, how they work, what the responsibilities are, what the expectations are on that. And they also identify one that they would like to get appointed to. So when they come out of this program, such as the 12 that are coming out right now, they just recently graduated, they've listed out which boards and commissions they're applying to, and they start with that. So when they get done, that connection's already made. So when over the next couple of weeks, when we're reviewing the NCEC appointment process, the city appointments, there's 2 people in that pool that have specifically come out of this program saying they want to be on the NCEC. So that's why I'm saying it's a great program. It doesn't cost us any money. Nexus is already doing it, and they go through this extensive process to make sure that people know what they're signing up for and that are truly interested in doing the work, give them the tools to be able to operate on boards and commissions, and then with a direct connection to which one do you want to join. I think this year, if I recall correctly, in the test project, there were 8 boards and commissions that were identified. About 4 or 5 of them were at the city. Excuse me.
So it's an external group that basically provides people with training to enter and participate in these boards and commissions.
Correct.
And it doesn't really require any operational or maintenance or any costs on the side of the city. It's an external thing.
Chair Gordon and Councilmember, yes, that is correct.
Okay, and then the second piece is the diversity survey. Mm-hmm. Okay, that pretty much makes sense. And then the appointment process. So the appointment process that I've seen, and this is simply from my standpoint, so there may be stuff going that you guys are doing that I'm not aware of, but I'm informed of vacancies on a board or on a commission, and then I reach out to usually my constituents and see who's interested. Obviously there's always an eye for how do we include more minorities, more people of color in the process, especially on boards which have none, CLIC being one of the ones that we've worked on. So I haven't seen you guys involved in that process, but that doesn't mean that you're not, so I just wanted to sort of see how that works.
Sure. Chair Gordon and Councilmember, the appointment process really varies from commission and board from one to the next a bit, and what we're trying to do is have more consistency among that. We're working with the city clerk's office. The city clerk actually does and supports all the appointment processes in the city. What our role, NCR department and NCEC, is to get the word out when these vacancies occur and encourage people to apply. So we're getting out into cultural communities, neighborhood organizations, other basic networks that we have. By streamlining the process to happen twice a year, we can put all the vacancies together in one spot, hand it to people, get that information, and then they turn around and apply, and then the city clerk's process takes it from there. What we did last year is we did spend quite a bit of time really researching where we're having success on diversity in our boards and commissions and where we weren't. And the diversity survey was a real good indicator in that over a 3-year period, we really made no change in the diversity composition of our boards and commissions. So we knew we needed to change something. We knew the applicant pool had increased considerably through the additional outreach. We've added since that time a voluntary sheet for people to fill out. Not everybody has to fill it out, obviously, but basically asking them to self-disclose out of the diversity factors so we can track the pool better. But then also looking at the 2 models in the city that seem to work the best in achieving diversity, and that was the Neighborhood Community Engagement Commission, which Brittany is on, as well as the Workforce Council. And what we found in both of those situations was it's a deliberate meeting of council members. I'll just talk about the NCEC because the Workforce Council I'm a little less familiar with, but with the NCEC, Chair Gordon would pull together a call out to council members saying we're going to look at the appointments for this commission, and we'll put out all the applications on the table. Staff sits in on that conversation because a lot of the folks that we may know, you may not know, and vice versa. And then we go through looking at a map, making sure we got geographic diversity. We intentionally go through gender, education, a variety of factors like that in order to try to get as diverse of a representation from the pool that applied as possible. So the department works on getting people to apply, And then what we've, and on a few specific cases, we've actually worked on the appointment process itself. What I've been working with on the city clerk's office is really to standardize that more across the way. And what we took to the council last year, which was approved but wasn't ever put in, we haven't operationalized it yet, was to use that same type of model for, I think we identified it was 17 development boards across the city that are the most impactful on city policy. And so we still need to get that final piece in place. So on the examples that you're using, yes, the department you wouldn't really see us there because we would be more on the outreach side. City clerk will and continue to be the department that actually runs that, but what we're doing is making recommendations about
So if I could just interrupt you real quick, just because you're getting into a few different things, I apologize. So at least from my experience, the appointments that I've made, I think almost entirely, maybe with the exception of one time, they've gone through. So I mean, I want your work to have a conclusion, to have sort of the end goal. And if we're just taking our recommendations, and I mean, one example was the individual that I appointed today, Mr. Abdullahi. I just knew him from the campaign trail last year, and I gave him a call. I knew he was heavily involved in health, and he was appointed. In that instance, obviously, we successfully got an additional person of color on the committee, but that wasn't accomplished through your department. So maybe you had somebody else that was on the docket that I didn't pay attention to. I just want to make sure we're not having duplicative efforts here.
And maybe I could just clarify a little bit too, because there's a limited number of appointments that council members get to make more independently.
Right.
And so this process that we're talking about, where the committee chair looks at and reviews them all, wouldn't necessarily happen with those individual appointments. And Public Health Advisory Committee is one, CLIC is another one. So two that you've mentioned. Recruitment, though, can happen actively with staff and everybody, but that's slightly different. And I think council members would have an opportunity, if they wanted to talk to staff and get more assistance with that as well, and people even in the department too. But
Chair Gordon, I would concur with what you were just saying there. The model that we were talking about, by having staff actually participate too in the broader discussions where it's not a specific appointment, allows us then to talk about such as the BCLI when people are coming forward out of there, because we're knowledgeable of that. So it helps to make sure that the council members are fully informed of what we know when people are coming forward. So that, and I don't want to go too far down this path, because that's another discussion. We'll be coming back with some recommendations around that, but really having more intentionality around the appointment process. And I'd also say, if I could just add, that by just even having this conversation, council members, I think, are just generally much more attuned to the diversity indicators that we have in place and that we're looking to try to achieve, which I think helps also. So,
council members Fry's, though, question makes me think that we might even want a little bit of another guide for those appointments that are more just up to the council office. Then how can they interact with the appropriate staff to make sure they're doing as good a job? But Councilmember Fry, you have more questions, I think.
Yeah, I apologize. One more question, Mr. Chair. So this would be on, it's my page number 8. I believe it's the page following the one that's showing right now. Yes. Okay. And this is on the work completed. It's item number 2. And I'm less concerned about sort of what's happened and more concerned about what's going to happen going forward. But it's neighborhood priority plans, supporting direct connections with the alignment between neighborhood issues and priorities with enterprise programs. First off, I'm assuming with enterprise programs, you mean the city. Okay, and then, so it's 28 neighborhoods have submitted 47 priorities. What kind of priorities are there? Are we talking about, goals of diversifying the boards, or is it, small area plans, or we need more retail, or what kind of?
Chair Gordon and council member, I actually have a list. Okay. A lot of times let me back up a second. The community participation program requires that neighborhoods actually submit a priority to really focus their work. We're not funding engagement just for the sake of engaging, but what is it that you as a community are working on?
Right.
And with that, whenever it involves any of the jurisdictional partners, because this is still funded under the NRP ordinance, so that includes the Park Board, Hennepin County, the School Board, and the city, that if there's an issue or a priority that affects any one of those jurisdictions, it's our role as a department that those neighborhoods submit those priorities to us early in the process, and then we make those connections with the participating group. So, topics that have come up as far as priorities: housing, parks, business development, inspections, safety. So there's a variety of them. I mean, and they continue down the list, many of which are handled just on the local level, just with the neighborhood itself. But I will say an example of a larger one is several neighborhoods in South Minneapolis, 4 of them specifically. We're looking at doing landscaping, a streetscaping project on 54th and Lindale, and so heavily involving Public Works in that conversation. And so we were brought into that process to facilitate that discussion and that connection with Public Works about that and developing actually a better relationship. The irony of that one was when that discussion first started, it was an adversarial relationship between the neighborhoods and Public Works. By the time the priority plan got to the NRP policy board, all that had been cleared up. So it was almost a formality when that priority plan was brought to the policy board. So our role was to making sure that there was a dialogue between the Public Works and the community and what those issues were and trying to get that figured out. Another one, just to give you maybe a little bit more tangible example, is the Sun neighborhoods. There's 7 or 8 neighborhoods in South Minneapolis. Southside United Neighborhood Group. It's a collaboration of neighborhoods. Brought forward a number of priorities also, one of which was around reg services and housing inspections. And so Nuria from Reg Services now goes out and meets with them, and we're drawing that connection to help them address some of the issues that they were bringing forward. So some of these issues actually will boil up to the council level. Many of them are resolved on the process on the way up, and a lot of them actually are just handled on the neighborhood level.
So when you say drawing that connection, I'm just trying to figure out practically what that means. It's, NRA is involved to make sure we have enough inspectors to ensure compliance with the regs. Right. Where is it that you guys come in?
Well, let me pull back to the 54th and Lindale example. They were looking at least exploring the notion of setting up a special service district for that area. And they were feeling that the connection with Public Works they weren't getting the response back, and they weren't getting an understanding of that process. Really what we did was step in with Public Works and, in essence, be the liaison in that conversation to bring that conversation to a positive place where now they have the information, they understand how the service districts are set up, and that they know who at Public Works who to talk to. Public Works understands what they're trying to do. The neighborhoods were really just looking at what it takes to set up a special service district, not necessarily that they were going to put one in place. They just wanted to know that. So we facilitated that dialogue to make sure that that understanding was there, and that Public Works then could respond to that directly, and that did occur.
Yes. So I guess my main point is I want to make sure that you all are utilized as efficiently and as effectively as possible. And, based on this conversation, my office may not have been utilizing you guys as fully as possible because, over the last at least 5-6 months, whatever it's been, all of that kind of community engagement, whether it's inspections or development or transportation, I've done. My office has done. And I don't want to duplicate efforts. At the same time, I want to, maximize the outreach and the engagement through your office. So I guess going forward, I'd like to figure out how to better do that. I don't know if that, I want to see practically what that looks like. Does that mean that you're attending neighborhood meetings with me? Does that mean that, I say, hey, David, the point that this particular constituent just made is a great one. Can you go talk with Steve Kotkiel for Public Works to see if we can't incorporate a new right-of-way into the, whatever it is. I just want to see how this can work practically.
Chair Gordon and Councilmember, absolutely. Those are ways that we can help. We have staff actually that go out to all the neighborhood organization meetings, kind of on a. They get to them actually every few months or so. Be happy to help you with that. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring this to the council today was, as much as we've refocused this work, and we wanted to kind of rebrand this as we're going out, because we did have a lot of lessons learned from last year and what we did and how it didn't work, that we now feel good about moving forward. But now that we have a new council, so that you have a better understanding about what we're working on, making sure that we're going in the right direction if this is what you feel we should be working on, as well as how we can better utilize and serve the community and yourself in doing that work. So yeah, by all means.
You kind of pointed out, I think, one of the main issues in your chart here. The city has its goals and priorities, And the neighborhood sets up small area plans and also has their own priorities. And those priorities are sometimes mutually exclusive, or it's very difficult to find where the overlap is. So that's where we do need help. And you know, if that means, I'd like it to be more than just attending meetings. I'd like to have sort of the follow through in going to Public Works or going to CPED, or figuring out the policy, because what I'm doing right now is I'll go to the neighborhood association and then they'll tell me 10 or 15 things and I'm frantically writing it down on my cell phone or texting my aide to say, hey, this is what we need to look into. That's where it would be helpful.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's an opportunity for a meeting to discuss this further. And just one other thing I thought of is that maybe it would be useful if you could forward to us the 47 priorities, because it looks like you have a list of all of them. And if that's convenient, we might be interested in seeing what they are, or however that is, even if they're not even associated with what neighborhoods they come from or whatever raw form they're in. We have some more questions. This has generated some more good discussion. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you. And it's an honor to meet you, Commissioner. Thank you for being here and for your hard work. I know that volunteering for these commissions takes a lot of time, energy, and dedication, and we wouldn't be able to meet our racial equity goals without the expertise and the work that you all bring and offer the city. NCR has been a really helpful department for me, not only when I worked for Councilmember Robert Lilligren, but currently now when I'm trying to lead efforts that engage more Latinos, East African community members in the work that we do. So with that, I just wanted to ask a question about number 1 under the strategic action plan, which is slide number 2, I think, in your presentation. It says neighborhood organizations increased resident involvement and access to the decision-making process. I'm just curious about why the language in here doesn't include more specific I guess, a more specific goal around diversity, increasing the diversity of our neighborhood association boards, the decision makers at the table there who decide how to use the budget and the resources and what kinds of plans to submit. Because I do see it articulated in number 2, which talks about, you know, reflecting the community that we live in. So I'm just wondering, you know, what the rationale of that is.
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Cano, we could easily change that to be state that, you know, to reflect the composition of the neighborhoods. The statement was, the thought behind it was intended to say when we are successful, and I'm just going to say when we are successful, resident involvement and access to decision making would be increased in neighborhood organizations. Implied in that was intended to be that it was going to be more diverse and more equitable in its approach. Now, we could easily call that out because it still meets the intent, and we can add that in there. At this point, as I was saying at the very beginning, this is in the development process, and so we can fine-tune some of the language on this, and so that's a great suggestion, and we can incorporate that into here. Because one of the lessons we learned last year was we need to be really, really, really specific about the language and be really clear about that. So.
Yeah, I think I would welcome more specific language around inclusion of people of color or underrepresented groups or something that just makes it more clear about the real goal, you know, we're trying to also have or tease out.
Well, Chair Gordon, council member, I want to reassure you that is completely my intent as the convener of the Equity Steering Committee. And there's a longer concept paper that is very specific. It does make notations of diversity. The whole plan is really geared around kind of diversifying these boards and commissions and the neighborhood groups in particular. When Lance first started the Blueprint Project, he was going to neighborhoods and hosting Blueprint conversations, and he came to my neighborhood. And I got to participate and then also witness how the other members of my neighborhood association responded. And so what does my neighborhood look like? Old white homeowners, and I'm the only woman of color, youngest woman, often in the room. And sometimes I bring my kids and things like that, and that can, you know, I don't know, raise eyebrows at different points. But in that conversation, what was telling to me was, one of the questions Lance asked was about, is your space welcoming? I was really surprised that most of the people in the room didn't feel like they had to create a welcoming space, like that wasn't their job. So it was enlightening to me to hear the members of the neighborhood association be very honest and blunt about what they think their roles are. And something I have asked David Rubidor on many occasions is, so when is the city, whoever the city is, going to send a very clear message to the neighborhood associations of what their expectations are? Because I don't think that's clear at all. And so then there's this rub, I think, between perhaps some neighborhoods are hostile to the NCR department because they think they're going to be like the department that like takes their money one day and runs. So then some don't want to work with the department at all because they're afraid of that. But in the language I see that the NCR uses, the presumption is that there's a collaborative relationship, right, between the city and neighborhoods. I don't think all neighborhoods think that or even want that. So I think this work is great, and I want to do the best I can to encourage folks like myself to get involved. But if they get involved, they're walking into hostile settings. And they have to be prepared for that. So I think the Boards and Leadership Program is great because they're going to be honest with you in that space and say, this is what you're walking into. And this is how you use, like, you know, the bylaws and the Roberts Rule in your favor. But you have to understand how to do that. Or you're going there, you won't know, right, what's going on, or you'll feel isolated outside the process. So that's why I'm really passionate about doing this work and trying to diversify the boards and commissions and the neighborhood groups. But it's really hard. It's a lot of emotional labor when you go into those spaces and you're not really being listened to, patronized. I mean, the things that happen in those meetings are very shocking, to say the least. But I think this work is going to shift that and make some people feel uncomfortable. I think uncomfortableness is okay. Right?
So I wanted to I have a few other questions, and I wanted to sort of just respond to that. I hope the NCEC Commission can make some suggestions about what policy initiatives the City Council can push forward to have more of that clear change happening, because we do invest a lot of money in the neighborhood associations. It's been a while that we've been talking about racial equity efforts and initiatives, and so it would be good to have support from NCEC in thinking about what types of things can the City Council be doing in terms of policy initiatives that we can pass to ensure that these neighborhood associations are responding more efficiently and effectively to this type of leadership and transition that we need to make. I wonder if David or the commissioner could speak to the One Minneapolis Fund. I wanted to just be enlightened because I wasn't aware that it was a program. I thought the One Minneapolis Fund was a pool of money that non-neighborhood associations that are diverse and led by people of color could get money from to do engagement work for the city. But does this involve other initiatives, or am I misunderstanding what the One Minneapolis Fund is?
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Cano, actually Brittany had a tremendous amount of influence over the development of that fund. So she can jump in here too. It is a fund, and it is for non-neighborhood organizations only. It's intended to be for community-based organizations that are culturally based. The intent of this fund, it's the first time we've ever done it. I'm really glad that we were able to get this out the door last year to fund, again, community-based organizations and leadership development as a way to engage communities of color into our engagement system. That's specifically what it's for.
Great. The One Minneapolis, I mean, it's a really great initiative. In the NCEC, there's a task force or a small committee that reviews all the applications. They make the recommendations for who should get the funds. They bring it to the table. We as a group discuss it. And I think last year there was the Lao Assistance Center got funds. Pillsbury United Communities, was it Waite Park?
Yeah,
Waite House got funds. So, I mean, I think it's a pool of money that a lot of people are seeking. I mean, we're getting a lot more applications than we can actually fund. There's a lot of need for these cultural orgs to get support. So I'm hoping that when we come to you all and ask for an increase in that money, that you consider that.
I'm going to take this opportunity for a shameless plug, because last year it was funded at $62,000, which is not a whole lot of money. This year, we moved that up to 80,000. The department actually, it's funded through general fund, so it's not through the consolidated TIF, so we're not taking money away from neighborhood organizations. This is new money that the council committed for this, specifically for this effort. This year, we had some savings because we had a couple of vacancies in the department for a while. And so I took those savings and plugged it into the One Minneapolis Fund. So we bumped that up to 80, it was like 80,000, I think, this year. So we're able to do 5 grants instead of the 3. And so that'll be coming to the commission. We're going to come back on our department budget to double the size of that to 120,000 on an ongoing basis in order to get more money out in this effort. We feel it's worked really well.
And just really quick, I know you mentioned policy recommendations. I am very much about getting actual tangible change to ensure that neighborhood groups in particular understand, right, what they're being held to. But that also puts an onus on the city council to be willing to put the onus on neighborhoods and say, this is the standard in which we expect. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that happening. I think neighborhoods, and Mr. Rubidor can speak to this, there have been a lot of issues with particular neighborhoods and kind of not following kind of respectful practices, isolating people out strategically, and that this department has to deal with that kind of stuff. And I think the reason that those things exist is because there is not a very clear, or it's policy or mandate that the city has said, this is what we expect, right? This is how, respectful meetings happen. You can't like kick people out or like, no one's holding them accountable to that. And I have yet to hear a city council member or someone say in a very clear and concise language, right, that this is the expectation. And I think neighborhoods, I failed to realize, even my own neighborhood, you're using city money. So, I mean, you're using city money. If you don't want to be affiliated with it, then like start your own, nonprofit or for profit. But if you are going to use city money, there are ways in which you should conduct yourself. And I think the department has been dealing with a lot of issues like that. There has to be some kind of clear set of policies that you will all uphold and hold the neighborhoods to.
I know that Councilmember Bender has a question, so I just have one more, and then I'll take my discussion offline and follow up with you guys. But the appointment process, I remember having discussions with NCR earlier this year about, we have a more diverse pool of applicants, but yet the people appointing still tend to fall into the same old patterns of appointing the same type of people. So what's digging deeper now? What's working with the NCEC appointment process that's not working with the other appointment processes, or what's the lesson learned, and how are we going to implement that moving forward?
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Kondo, what we found when we looked at this last year was that the model for the Workforce Council and the NCEC is very different in how we did the appointments. Under the leadership then of Councilmember Lilligren, at least with the NCEC, it was a very deliberate conversation where we would sit down literally at a table with a map. I would be sitting there, as well as any other council member that wanted to partake in that discussion, talking about qualifications about folks that were applying for the boards and for that particular commission. And so we could have a very deliberate conversation, and in there looking at the diversity factors, which go beyond just race and ethnicity. It includes gender, it includes age, income, a variety of different factors, handicap or disability status, things like that we would take and then try to make sure, one, we have qualified people coming onto the commission, but then also making sure that we had this diversity overlay to make so where all things being equal, if people have different roles or different backgrounds or respect of life experiences, they could bring that to the table. And it was very successful. And the Workforce Council, my understanding, does a very similar type of deal. So it's to model that across other boards and commissions across the city. Again, this would be a conversation with the city clerk's office to really get that operationalized, and I've talked to Casey about this, about having our next step in getting that done. But that's what we found as being the difference.
Okay, well, thank you for all your hard work. I know that NCR is a new department in the history of the city. You haven't been operating for the last 40 years, so I think the work is heavy and it's evolving, and I want to be a part of it, and I want to be helpful, and I want to thank you for being helpful too. I know that my neighborhoods are asking for help in how to make these changes. I met with Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association not too long ago, and they said, we get it, we're an all-white board, we want to change, what can you do to help us? So I think some people are ready, and I know that the neighborhoods change, from different area to different area. And some organizations want to take leadership in this front, and others don't. And I think we have to help both.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rubador and Ms. Lewis, for being here. I think you very eloquently stated some of the challenges of the current neighborhood organization structure, and I wonder if this process is going to look into the kind of underlying assumptions we're making about public engagement. For example, what kind of decisions are neighborhood organizations making? Should organizations that are neighborhood-based with nonprofit boards be the conveners of conversations about transportation projects, development projects, in absence of any city staff? Are those kinds of questions part of this process?
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Bender, as I mentioned earlier, when we go through this process, pretty much everything is on the table. Everything from the way the department operates to the way that we look at neighborhood organizations to how we do our appointments with the boards and commissions. I think in order to accomplish our goal here, we have to be really open-minded about getting and very open to getting feedback and input from the community as a whole. So really, as we embark on this, what I'm looking for is going through these focus groups, hearing from the folks that are out there to know what we need to do, how we need to do it, things that we should look at that will then inform us, and then we'll bring back those recommendations, which that may include what the role of neighborhood organizations are.
I would just voice that I think it's critically important to ask those big questions, because if we're going to be relying on neighborhood organizations to be the convener of public engagement in the city, then I think we really need to understand how many people are attending their monthly meetings. How are neighborhood organization boards spreading the word about development projects or transportation projects? Are they serving as gatekeepers or as conveners of an authentic conversation? And I have witnessed both ends of that spectrum, but for the most part, often I see a lot of gatekeeping in the communities that I'm representing, and I think it's hurting the city, and that it has to be central to this conversation. How are we convening these conversations? What kind of questions are being asked? How inviting are the meetings? Are we ensuring how many people have been, when we get a letter on the official letterhead of an organization, do we know how many people participated in that conversation? Was it 3? Was it 300? Each of us represent 30,000 people. So how are we balancing those voices with the number of people that are signing the letters?
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Bender, I think those are all really good points to bring up and things that we can discuss. I lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to respond.
Some of those questions might have been rhetorical as well, and larger questions that Councilmember Bender wants to make sure we answer through the focus groups and the entire process and some of the issues we've raised. So I don't think you have to feel like you necessarily have to answer them all. Was there more of a specific response you wanted, Councilmember Bender, or was the idea to kind of make the point and emphasize that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure that these larger questions are on the table, because I think I'm a little skeptical at our ability to force 71 separate organizations to be better actors than they are today. And so I think we maybe need to ask some questions about what is the bigger issue here about public engagement in the city, and is having 71 separate organizations convening 71 separate conversations about policy issues the correct way to do community engagement, particularly in a city where the average age is 33 in Minneapolis. I mean, how many people 33 and under are willing to attend a monthly meeting or join their neighborhood board? Is that the correct way to engage the next generation of our workforce, the people who are raising their families in the city, the families that have young kids that aren't able to attend a night meeting? Or do we need to look at new ways? And is that responsibility incumbent on the 71 separate nonprofit boards, or is it incumbent on the city as a whole to create those tools to make sure that we are engaging all of our population in these decisions?
I mean, I think you bring up a lot of really great points. I'm in that under 33 pool. And I think you have to provide some kind of avenue for people in their local neighborhoods to participate. Because not everyone wants to go beyond the neighborhood meeting. It's a street light, or it's a troubled house, or so for some people, it's really just wanting to get engaged enough to ensure livability in their backyards, and that's the extent of it for them. So those local spaces have to exist in some way. but they do need to change. I will agree with you 100% about that. And I want you all to walk away and considering, like, what does it mean for the city council to affect that change in clear policy ways, but then not in just what you say, but what you do. And with the NCR, I might be on like the more aggressive fringe of this, but I believe that the NCR needs to have a policy document that says, and something of that was created but wasn't for policy, but something that literally will say, this is the expectation, and we can take your money away. Like, I feel, I'm of that radical fringe that says, like, this is city money. If you agree to this ethic, right, and this relationship with the city, right, and staff should come out and, you know, assess the neighborhood groups, there's no fear. That sounds terrible, but, like, they feel like they can exist with or without you anyway. You're not really holding them to anything, as far as I'm concerned. So that in many groups go rogue and do their own thing with the money anyways. I mean, obviously they have to submit the priority plans and all that stuff, but they don't have to be welcoming spaces if they don't want to be, right? So how can the city hold them accountable to that?
I would just add to that too, just to underscore once again here that I think there may be some things that the city enterprise as a whole has to take more of a lead role in convening. That maybe it's not working to have neighborhood organizations lead the conversation about some of these big infrastructure projects or large questions about development, that rather maybe it's the city's responsibility to have more of a role there, to have city staff convening conversations to make sure that we don't have this divergence of neighborhood priorities and city priorities. If our city isn't reflecting the values of our community, we have $1 billion budget problem. So how are we heading that off at the front end, asking these big policy questions in a way that's engaging a lot of people? I would argue that that's the city's responsibility, and that we can't necessarily, even if we tried to force boards full of volunteers that have busy lives to do a better job, that maybe it's not their job. I think it should be the city's job in a lot of instances to set up a framework that works for people and engaging our multi-generational and diverse communities. Well,
I appreciate that, and I totally agree with you. In fact, I think if you go back to the second slide, there's these three areas that you want to work on, and I really appreciate focusing down there. And definitely city enterprise engagement, we probably do just as poorly as the neighborhood organization engagement half of the time. And so I think that we need to look at how we're doing that and what we do. I also will note that my neighborhood organization has changed quite a bit with technology in terms of how they get input, discussion lists, Facebook, and all of these things. And I think that's certainly how do you actually get that engagement. Increased resident involvement doesn't necessarily mean you come to the monthly committee meeting either. And access to decision-making process could mean it differently. And neighborhood organizations, I think, have kind of a limited sphere of influence they can have over the council. But I was concerned that you haven't heard any council member say that we expect every single neighborhood organization out there to be open to every single resident that wants to come, that we can't have barriers to participation. I think we have, at least NRP in the past, has cut funding for neighborhoods who weren't doing that. But and if we have to work on our guidelines and define that better, that's what you can do through these focus groups, and you can come back there. But we say in the guidelines we want to provide for participation of all segments of the neighborhood, including but not limited to homeowners, renters, property owners, business owners, immigrants, non-English speakers, low-income residents, and community of colors. This is a requirement to be eligible for funds. That we have to ensure membership in the organization is open to all residents of the neighborhood. And neighborhood organizations may not impose membership dues or require attendance at a certain number of meetings before voting rights are conferred. And they have to hold regular open meetings and take positive steps to encourage all interested parties to attend and participate. And if you'd never heard a council member say that before, you've heard a council member at least say it now. Chair of the Community Engagement Commission, and it's really important. In fact, I think that the neighborhood organization system will die if it can't embrace those and if it can't carry those forward, because then it's not going to be working for a majority of the council here. So we really need to look at this and engage. I also think we need to make sure our enterprise wide engagement is doing that, and our boards and commissions, and I really like the refocused action plan. I think this is going to help us. I think you've taken off quite a big bite to finish up before September, and we're going to direct you to come back and report to us in December, I think is the motion at the end of this action. And I think that will be interesting. It will be really helpful. I think this is our chance. We've had our new community engagement system in place for a couple years, and now it's our chance to refresh it and get it right and improve it and see what we can do and help people do the right thing out there. So I think with that, we move our staff. Well, thank you profusely for all your work and all your efforts and for your report, and also my committee members here for the discussion here. There's obviously a lot more we can talk about and a lot more we'll do over the months ahead. But I do want to move to receive and file the report and also direct staff and the commission to report back to the City Council by December 1st, 2014 with a summary of the findings, draft recommendations, and performance measures regarding the blueprint for equity engagement. I think it's really important that we actually know what we're after. That's really going to help our departments out there do the enterprise. I also think it's going to help the neighborhood organizations, and we don't even know what our goal is. And I also think we don't even know what our baseline is. Our boards and commissions, we have a little baseline, we know where we're starting from, but the neighborhood groups, it's all anecdotal yet, so that's a different story. I editorialized a lot on the staff direction, but you all have it before you in the agendas. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries. We do have one more report, and I think committee members might appreciate brevity at this time. So if you can, we did get extensive report with your highlights and feedback, and we had a chance to look at it, but why don't you run through maybe some of the highlights and let us know how the conference went. Mr.
Chair Gordon and committee members, I am joined also by Kirk Rogensack, who is NCEC Commissioner, who was on the Planning Committee for the conference, and he's going to talk a little bit about this too. We will be brief. We had our annual Community Connections Conference on Saturday, March 22nd at the Minneapolis Convention Center. This was our second one. We did one a couple years ago. We had about 430 people attend. This was our second one. We had the NUSA conference last year in between, so we didn't have our local conference. This is a conference specifically for the City of Minneapolis, for community organizations, residents in the city, and cultural communities to collectively come together with city staff and city departments to really support some broader connections and getting neighborhoods and residents to come together, and then also work on citywide goals and a citywide perspective. It's basically an effort that we started a couple of years ago in our business plan to move away from kind of this parochial approach where neighborhoods were looking at themselves as very independent and into a local area, but seeing themselves into a larger framework of working within the city. So we had our first conference. Again, the audience, neighborhood organizations, cultural organizations, city departments, had the purposes laid out here. I won't go through those. Those are in the final report, which I believe you have a copy of. Kirk's going to talk about the Planning Committee.
I'll go quick on the Planning Committee. I'm not going through all the names, but as you can see, 2 from the NCEC, and we have 3 from the NCR, and then a couple of different neighborhood organizations were there too. We had the Jordan Area Community Council and Nokomis East represented there. So we're trying, and it's both north and south in Minneapolis, and trying to get as broad a group as we could from there. And a couple of the sponsors we had there too. We're trying to increase some sponsorship too for the next one.
So we had 490 people, 498 people attend, so it's a pretty good jump from the last conference. And I think from an ongoing basis, 500 people is about what we're going to get on a Saturday and at the end of March. What was really nice this year is we had really good participation from the city. Again, one of the intents here is to build a stronger alliance between community and the city of Minneapolis. 21 of the 40, I think it was 41 workshops were actually sponsored by city staff and run by city departments. 11 of the booths, we had 40-some exhibit booths were actually city departments with more than 80 city employees that attended.
So, and just a brief overview too for you. The point of the whole conference was to get people to understand how to work with the city. So that's the whole point. So the highlights of some of the feedback we got, we were very pleased with 89% either satisfactory or very satisfactory, and a big 83% for the keynote speaker. The little picture you see down there is when the keynote speaker was talking and how she got the whole group involved before we went to the workshops. So that leads to our next slide, which shows a little bit of overview of the feedback there. Just a reference on the food we decided to get local vendors there and not what we had at the convention center's food, and that seemed to be a very big hit. Just another way of trying to get local people involved with the city. I won't read the rest of that for you.
So and I just want to highlight that one of the things that we did with this conference, and we did with the first conference, was really trying to attract smaller minority-owned or women-owned businesses into supporting the conference. We had really good support from the Minneapolis Convention Center to allow us to do that. And so we were able, for the food vendors, to bring in 5 local food vendors that brought in ethnic-based food. So it was a really kind of a good mix of food. People love the food. And honestly, we got twice as much food for half the cost of if we would have gone through the convention center. So it was great that we were able to do that. We have a bunch of lessons learned in our report. Again, for the sake of time, I won't go through those in great detail. But just to highlight a couple things, next year we're going to recruit a multilingual person to be on the planning committee. We did provide a multilingual environment with translation services at the main kind of gatherings, and we did have that available for the workshops. However, we were getting feedback from the folks that were doing the translation work saying that if they're part of the design, it actually makes it a lot easier to create a multilingual environment. In the planning, it has a lot to do with kind of more prescribed speeches and what have you, that they have that information in advance, and it makes it a lot better experience for folks that are not speaking English in there. Next year, we're going to engage the elected officials, you guys, a lot more than we did this year. We'd like you to be participating, and we'll figure out a way to do that. We're going to reduce the number of workshops. We had too many workshops this year. Many of them were really popular, but we had a number of them that were very low attendance, and so we're probably going to cut them down to around 30, somewhere in that area. And then, as Kirk mentioned, the food and some of the lessons learned around the food. So with that, any questions on the conference?
I just have a couple quick questions. How much did it cost us?
The total, Chair Gordon, the total cost of the conference was around, if I recall correctly, around $46,000, of which the department paid $35,000, which is really close to what we had budgeted for the conference. So we received a grant from Centerpoint Energy, Leech Lake Band of the Ojibwe, and then also the Minneapolis Convention Center gave us a grant to reduce the operating costs.
And this is something you think it's still worth doing annually?
Chair Gordon, yes, I do. I think this is a great thing to bring people together. It really kind of helps refresh our engagement system. I think we do more on the list that we had in the previous slide where we had neighborhoods, boards and commissions, and city enterprise. The city enterprise and the neighborhood organizations really participate heavily in this. On the boards and commissions, I think we could beef that up. Although this year we had a couple of workshops that were on that, and so we're incorporating that into there. But to Councilmember Bender's point earlier, also too about getting broader representation and having more of a dialogue around neighborhood organizations being in a larger city context, this is a chance to help with that kind of environment. So not working so much locally, but also understanding the role in a larger city enterprise.
Well, I appreciate that, and I attended part of it, and I was very impressed, and I actually did like the fact that there were so many city employees who were there tabling and involved and engaged with the community. Did you have one more comment?
I just wanted to say, too, it's also a chance for anyone who has a specific question on how to work with the city to get it done. This is another way that some of these people came in, younger people that might be just starting to figure out how to, this is another venue for the city to have to get people engaged in that process. So.
Any other comments or questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none, appreciate the conciseness of the report, and thanks so much for having to stay through the whole afternoon for that. Really appreciate it. I'll move to receive and file that report. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Seeing no further business before us, this meeting is adjourned.